The title of my research paper is 27 years of research on cost stickiness, a systematic teacher review and the future research agenda. First of all, the first one who directed me to this topic, the cost stickiness, was Dr. Amr Nazi in 2013. I was his student in Mansour University. It was one of the was very interesting accounting topic that I like so much. I published 3 papers in this topic, and this is the 4th one, but it is still under review. Okay, so my co-authors, Hisham Ali, he is PhD student in Nottingham Business School, and PhD student Heba Nail from, she is PhD student in Nottingham University Business School as well. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about the idea itself. What is the meaning of cost stickiness? And I will go further to talk about the methodology that we applied in our research paper to conduct the systematic, or could be the first systematic teacher review. So first of all, we have to stress that the accounting textbooks assume that the cost behavior is linear. But the research found evidence that the cost behavior is not linear all the time, okay? And this is the meaning of cost stickiness. So we can refer to cost stickiness like a non-linear behavior or cost asymmetry. The 3 refers to the same thing, okay? So sorry about that. Okay, so Anderson et al. In his paper, or their paper in 2003, found evidence that cost behavior is not linear all the time. They found that for 1% increase in the sales or 1% increase in the activity, the costs will increase by 0.55. Okay, but when the activity decreases by the same increase by 1%, they found that the cost decreased by only 0.35. According to the traditional cost model, the change in the cost should be systematic, should be equal. So the increase in the cost should equal the decrease in the cost, but the evidence, the reality is different. Okay, another example. Also, when the activity increases by 1%, the cost is increased by 0.75 and the decrease by 0.85 for the same change in the activity. And this phenomena is referred to as anti-sticky cost. So we have, by the way, 2 terminology here, sticky cost and anti-sticky cost. Example 1 refers to sticky cost and example 2 refers to anti-sticky cost. To understand this phenomenon more, we have this graph. We can see in the graph 3 lines. The central line is the straight line. This straight line refers to the normal, the traditional cost behavior. We don't have any sticky. The cost behavior in this case for this linear line is linear, okay? But we have 2 different cases. The first one is the flatter. This flatter line refers to the sticky cost behavior, and the dotted line illustrates the opposite scenario, which is the anti-sticky cost. So in this graph, we can understand that there are 3 different sorts of cost behavior: linear cost behavior, sticky cost behavior, and anti-sticky cost behavior. Do you know what is our problem? The problem is that all the accounting textbooks, all the accounting techniques, such as activity-based activity-based costing, pricing, cost estimation, CVP, break-even point, all these accounting techniques assume that the cost behavior is linear all the time. However, the reality is not. Why? Because in the reality, we have 3 different types of behavior. It is not only the linear behavior. From the literature, there are strong evidence, whether in advanced countries or developing countries, that the cost behavior is not linear all the time. So for example, here Anderson et al. 2003 found evidence in USA, and Via and Pergo in 2014 found another evidence. And even in Egypt, in my paper in 2018 and another paper with Dr. Amr in 2017, we found strong evidence that both the selling general administrative and the cost of goods sold behave in a sticky way. Okay, so we have sufficient evidence in both developing countries and advanced countries on cost stickiness. So what are the main objectives of this paper? Okay, actually we have four. The first is to present the first systematic literature review in cost stickiness behavior. Okay, so from our review to the teacher, we didn't find any systematic literature review. So we wanted to contribute by providing the first systematic literature review. And the second objective is to explore, to understand, to discover the different aspects of cost stickiness research to date. What are the different aspects of this research? What about the research quality of cost stickiness? What about the historical development? Okay. The third objective was to determine the cost stickiness research gaps. And this is very important. Why? Because if you put your hand on the research gaps in cost stickiness, as a researcher, you will be able to go forward and conduct more research on these research gaps. And the fourth objective is to present a detailed future research agenda to help researchers to develop the research. Actually, our paper, aimed to answer these questions. Okay, so for example, what are the top examined drivers of cost stickiness? What are the economic consequences of cost stickiness that are examined in the literature? Okay, and also other questions such as what are the significant gaps and what is the impact of cost stickiness research? How has research on cost stickiness developed over time? Okay, how is cost stickiness research distributed between the developed and developing countries? So 9 different questions. We worked hard to find answers to these questions. Okay, but the ultimate outcome of our research paper is to present detailed research agenda to help you to develop research if you are interested in cost stickiness. This is the research approach and the structure that we followed in our research. I see it could be more complicated, but I will go through each of these parts in details. So first of all, if you like to conduct systematic literature review for any accounting topic, for example, if you want to conduct systematic literature review for earning management, for income smoothing research, for big data, you have to create a structure like this. The first point here is to see, okay, is to identify the need for this review. Why? Why the review, your review is important? In our paper, we didn't find any systematic literature review. So we thought that it could be a contribution to provide the first systematic literature review. After that, we had to develop a review protocol. For any systematic literature review, you have to create a protocol and apply its stages, and I will talk about this in details later. After that, we classified our studies into 3 themes. The studies that examined or provide evidence on cost stickiness, the studies who examine the determinants of cost stickiness, and a third group of studies who examine the economic consequences. After that, we examined 6 different, and by the way, let me stress on this point that our review is classified into 3 reviews. So there are 3 reviews, not 1, okay? The first review is a review of the aspects of the reviewed papers. By the way, we collected 80 papers examined the cost stickiness. So our first review was for the different aspects. So what is the classification of these articles? What is the historical development? How the cost stickiness research was developed, and the frequency distribution of series and so on. The second review is what? Is the review of the results found and reported by the cost stickiness research. And the third review is the review of the models employed in cost stickiness literature to find the evidence on cost stickiness. And at the end, we finalize our review or our paper by preparing the table of literature gaps and providing future research agenda. Okay. One critical step in developing any systematic literature review is to develop a review protocol. This paper, which was published by Transfield et al. 2003, it was published in Forrester Journal. Recommend and advise all researchers to create their protocol. The protocol, according to this paper, is like a plan that helps to protect the objectivity and providing explicit descriptions of the steps to be taken. So here in our paper, we followed 6 different steps. The first one is to construct research or search keywords list. And second is to identify the target search engines and the databases. And the third one is to set selection criteria. Because, you know, if you search on Google for articles on cost stickiness, you will find maybe 200, 300 papers. But in your review, to protect the objectivity and to ensure the quality, you have to set criteria. You shouldn't include any paper, okay? Because there are some papers, without any pieces. There are some papers without cost stickiness. Okay, they are not let's say it is not qualified to be considered in our review. These are the 2 main papers that we depended on to develop our methodology. Okay, the left side paper, it is published in British Journal of Management, Forrester Journal, and the right one is published in Journal of Management. And we used these papers to develop our methodology. And as you can see here, there are 3 stages for any systematic literature review. The first one is to plan your review and develop a review protocol. The second one is to start your review and applying your review protocol. And the third one is to start reporting, preparing tables, preparing graphs, and disseminate your results. Okay. Okay. About the keywords, you know, one of the critical steps in our review, the first step, is to identify which research articles should be included in our review. So we use these keywords to search on Google and on other databases for any articles. So we use the cost behavior, cost stickiness, anti-stickiness, cost asymmetry, and so on. The second one is we used different search engines and databases to download any relevant articles, such as Emerald, Google Scholar, Science Direct, and so on. Also, by the way, we use the reference list at the end of the research cost stickiness articles. The selection criteria, in my opinion, is the most important stage in the systematic literature review. Okay, as I told you, there are hundreds of papers on cost stickiness, but you should put your criteria. What are our criteria? Okay, we were very selective to ensure the quality of our review. The first criteria is that the article should examine cost stickiness as a central research question. Okay. The second, this paper to be selected in our review should be published in English and online academic and peer-reviewed journals, because there are some journals you can pay and they get acceptance the second day. And you know more than me this point, okay? So of course we shouldn't take any research paper on cost stickiness. The third one, working papers, e-theses, and articles published on SSRN were not selected. Why? Because these articles, were not reviewed, and one of our criteria is to select the reviewed papers only. Okay, the same for the working papers. And as you know, there are 4 scale or 4 rankings for the papers according to the ABS. So only we selected any article published in 2-star or 3-star or 4-star journals. For the 1-star, we ignored this. Why? To increase the quality of our review. Okay, so what are the review outcomes? Okay, after applying our selection criteria, we got 80 articles that satisfy our review criteria between 1994 to December 2020. And that is why the title of our paper includes 27 years. So why 27 years? Because the review articles are published between 1994 and December 2020. And these 80 articles are published in 36 journals. 89% of these articles used non-financial firms, examined cost stickiness in non-financial firms. The majority, as you can see, 89. 2% only examined the cost stickiness in financial firms, including banks. And this is indication that there is a lack of research on cost stickiness in financial institutions. And 9% of our sample examined cost stickiness in both financial and non-financial firms. If we classify our studies based on the theme, we can say that 24% of our review articles, 24% of the 80 articles examined or provide evidence on cost stickiness. 62% of cost stickiness articles examine determinants of cost stickiness. What are the drivers of cost stickiness? And only 14% found to examine the consequences of cost stickiness. Okay, so this is a classification based on the theme. Okay, about the historical development of cost stickiness, this is one of the main aspects that we worked to discover. Okay, so we found that 85% of the articles were published during the last 7 years, between 2014 and 2020. This means what? This means that the awareness or the attention paid to this phenomena, this cost stickiness increased, start to increase in 2014 up to date. But for 1 year only, which is 2019, 21 studies were published on cost stickiness. It is the first year with publication on cost stickiness. Okay, approximately 22% of our sample were published in 1 year, 2019. And of course, we have some years without any publication at all, such as 1995, 2009. I don't know why 2009, 2011, we didn't find any research articles on cost stickiness. Okay. About the theories that were used or employed in these articles, in our review articles, we found that the 80 articles employed 27 theories, okay? And the most frequent theory was the theory of cost asymmetry. This was used in 24 studies. And of course, there are some other theories that was mentioned or used for just one time, such as, for example, resource-based theory or public choice theory. Agency theory comes in the second place, where this theory was employed in 13 studies. Okay, but the first theory, the most frequent theory, the most used theory was theory of cost asymmetry. This is another aspect that we examined about the cost stickiness research. It is very important to evaluate the research quality. as I told you, you should be selective in your research. You shouldn't refer to or use any paper as a reference, okay? So to evaluate the research quality, we followed two approaches. The first one, depending on the journal ranking, EPS, okay? And the second one based on the number of citations. Okay, I will explain. This is based on the journal ranking. We found that 25% of the articles are published in 4-star journals, and 24% of our articles were published in 3-star, and the remaining 51% of the review articles were published in 2-star. This means what? This means that about 49% of the 80 articles are published in 3- and 4-star journals, which is a strong indication that half of the research on cost stickiness is published in top-ranked journal. It could be indication that it is an important accounting issue. Okay, because of time, so I will go faster. The second approach to identify, to evaluate the quality of the research is by citations. All of you know what I mean, but can I ask you a question, please? Here we have two papers. It is an example, by the way. Paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 was published in 2010. Paper 2 was published in 2017. The number of citations for paper 1, according to Google Scholar, is 1,000. The citations for the second paper is 500. Which one is better, in your opinion? I need to hear from you. So two papers with two different citations. In your opinion, which one we should consider as a first priority based on the citations? Okay, so, okay, if we, okay, let me, someone want to get in. Okay, so Dr. Mone says that the first paper should be, paper number 1 should be considered. Why? Because it has 1,000 citation. However, this is not correct. Do you know why? Because the 1,000 citations were collected during the last 11 years, from 2010 to 2021. But the second paper collected 500 citations in the last 4 years. So paper 2 is better than paper 1. Okay, this means what? This means that we should consider the time, because it is normal that if your paper is published 10 years ago, it will collect more citations. So it is not a sign of originality or contribution of your paper or quality of your paper. You should consider the time. Paper 2 is better than paper 1, despite the fact that paper 2 was published in or paper 2 has lower citations than paper 1. We should consider the time. Based on that, we use the Google Scholar. We applied this formula. It was published or used by Demey et al. 2016, where we divide the number of citations by the citation years. 2021 minus publication year. Okay, we prepare this table. As we can see in this table, the first paper is that of Anderson. It was, by the way, it is a pioneer paper in cost stickiness. According to Google Scholar, on 10th of January 2021, the number of citation was 1,289. But after we apply our formula, this formula that considers the time, because the time factor should be included. Okay, so the CPY was 72, and the same for the second, the same for the third, and so on. So as we can see, the Anderson comes first with the first citation or with the highest citation, followed by Jean et al., Weiss, and so on. So if you are going to prepare systematic research review and evaluate the research quality, please consider the time effect and apply this formula. Okay, about the allocation of cost stickiness research by country. developing and developed countries. So we found that our sample examined 66 different countries. 24 of these countries are developing and 76 are developed countries. And this is indication that there is still a lack of research on cost effectiveness in our developing countries. Okay, so this is a table that shows the allocation of cost stickiness in developed countries. As we can see, 30% of research on cost stickiness found in the first 6 countries, found in USA with 17%, found in Germany with 2% to 75%, UK, Belgium, Italy, and Australia. But USA comes first, okay, with the Lion stake with 17.43%. What about the developing countries? China comes first with 2.45%. And we found, by the way, evidence that cost stickiness in the Arab countries is very rare. The research on cost stickiness is very rare. Only 5 studies found to examine cost stickiness in the Arab countries. 3 of them published on Egypt, and 1 in United Arab Emirates, and 1 in Jordan. Okay. Going faster, yes. What about the allocation of cost stickiness research based on the cost category? We found that the 80 articles examine the behavior of 18 different costs according to this table. As you can see, selling, general administrative, operating cost, cost of goods sold, total cost, and so on. But the most examined cost was selling, general, and administrative. 36% of research examined this cost. Okay, so yes, there are just 2 slides before I finish. So this is our research agenda, teacher gap and research agenda. We found a lack of research on the economic consequences of cost stickiness. So our recommendation is that we encourage future researchers to do more research on the implications of cost stickiness, how the cost stickiness could affect the outcomes of the accounting techniques. We didn't find any paper who provide evidence on how the results of accounting techniques could be misleaded, could be distorted because of the existence of cost stickiness. So our advice to you, if you want to continue research on cost stickiness, is to examine how cost stickiness could distort pricing, how cost stickiness could distort cost estimation, how cost stickiness could affecting negatively activity-based costing. Also, another literature gap that we found is that about the uncertainty. Uncertainty was examined as a major reason for cost stickiness. However, we found only 3 studies who examined the uncertainty as a determinant of cost stickiness. Also, the existence of key employees and intellectual capital could be a reason for cost stickiness, by the way. So, but we didn't find, I think just 1 study examined the intellectual capital as a determinant of cost stickiness. So it is a very good research idea, how the existence of intellectual capital could affect the cost stickiness and the cost behavior. Also, how the ownership structure could affect the cost behavior. This is another research idea. So only 3 studies found to examine the ownership structure. But by the way, none of the studies found to examine how the governmental ownership could affect the cost behavior. One more research gap is that as we have seen, only 2% of the studies examine cost stickiness in financial institutions. So you have to examine cost stickiness in financial institutions. Another idea is to compare the cost behavior in both traditional and Islamic banks. You know that in Islamic banks, a developed type of governance applied, dependent on the Sharia law. Okay, so here you can compare the cost behavior in both traditional and Islamic banks. Another idea is related to the empire building hypothesis. This hypothesis was only examined by Shin et al. In his paper in 2012, and more research could be conducted on this hypothesis. It is a main core of cost stickiness, by the way, empire building. One more idea that we found, or one more gap, is that almost all the research papers on cost stickiness follow the quantitative approach. Okay, none of the studies in our review found to use qualitative approach. So it is very important to hear from the managers, to hear from the professionals in companies, whether they are aware of cost stickiness or not, because it is a big problem if they are not aware of this problem. Okay. Another research gap is related to the country. 24 of the research has been conducted in developing countries. So more research is encouraged in the Arab countries and developing countries. One more research gap is about the external editor. External editor could play a role, could affect the decisions of managers, and at the end could affect the cost behavior. However, we didn't find any study that examined the role of external editor. Okay. The last point is about the characteristics of CEO. We didn't find any study that examined how the culture, religion, education, experience, and the gender of CEO could affect the cost behavior. Okay, and by the way, there is a strong link. Why? Because at the end, the decisions taken by the CEO is or are a main reason for cost stickiness.